Be me, 30 years old. Standing outside a coffee shop on a cold Saturday morning. See him through the window. Actually see them. My hands are shaking, and it's not from the cold. Need to back up 5 years to explain how I got here. Be me at 25. Working as a corporate human resources specialist at a mid-sized tech company. Good at my job, really good. Knew exactly how to navigate every policy, every loophole, every complaint procedure. Used that knowledge the way a surgeon uses a scalpel. Precise, deliberate, effective. Had this, let's call it a worldview. Men were the problem with literally everything. Not some men, not certain behaviors, not specific systems. Men as a category, as a concept, as a gender. Every single one carried the disease of their sex. Spent my evenings at organizing meetings. We'd plan protests, coordinate actions, share stories. My stories were always the most popular. Told them about Marcus from accounting, who I got transferred to the satellite office. His crime, correcting my numbers in a meeting. He was right, by the way, but that wasn't the point. Filed a complaint about him making me feel unsafe and undermined. 3 weeks later, he was in a basement office 40 miles away. Told them about Derek from IT, who asked me out. Poor bastard was so nervous. Brought me coffee first, said he'd noticed we both liked the same books. I reported him for creating a hostile work environment through unwanted advances. He got a formal warning in his file. My friends loved that one. We'd laugh about male fragility, about how they couldn't handle rejection. Truth was, I could have just said no. But where was the fun in that? Where was the justice? These men walked through life on easy mode while we suffered. Every door opened for them, every opportunity handed over. They needed to feel a fraction of the pain women experienced. My older brother stopped talking to me around this time. He'd gotten divorced, was fighting for custody of his daughter. Kept trying to tell me how the system was biased, how his ex was lying about him, how he couldn't afford a lawyer as good as hers, how the judge assumed he was the problem. I told him he was finally experiencing consequences for his gender's actions. He said, "I'm your brother. I've never been anything but good to you." I said, "You benefit from a system built on our oppression that makes you complicit." Haven't heard from him in 5 years. My dad sided with him, stopped inviting me to holidays. Fine, they were probably misogynists anyway. The fact that my dad had raised me alone after mom left, worked 2 jobs to put me through college. Irrelevant. He was still a man. Work became my hunting ground. There was this guy, James, in marketing. Talented, everyone liked him, up for a promotion. I heard him talking to another guy about how hard it was being a single dad, how he had to leave exactly at 5 to pick up his kid, how he worried it made him look uncommitted, how his ex-wife had primary custody because the judge said children need their mother, how he'd been passed over before because he couldn't do the after-work networking events. Perfect target. Started documenting every interaction. Collected evidence of microaggressions. The time he held a door, benevolent sexism. The time he complimented my presentation, patronizing. The time he didn't invite me to a meeting, exclusion. The time he did invite me to a meeting, tokenism. Built a case over 3 months. Presented it to the director as a pattern of gendered discrimination. James didn't get the promotion. They gave it to me instead. I saw him crying in his car one day. Probably worried about making rent, about his kid. I felt powerful. Shared the story at our next meeting. Everyone clapped. We talked about how male tears were delicious, how they'd been making us cry for centuries, how this was just the beginning of balancing the scales. Then there was Nathan. He was different from the others, which made him worse somehow. Worked in product development, always said good morning to everyone. Brought in donuts on Fridays, remembered people's birthdays, volunteered with some youth mentorship program on weekends, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries. The kind of man who performed goodness. Had to be performing, right? Nobody was actually that kind. It was a manipulation tactic. Had to be. He started trying to talk to me around month 3 of working there. Asked about my weekend. Noticed when I seemed stressed. Brought me tea once when I mentioned having a headache. Classic nice guy behavior. Building up credit to cash in later for sex or emotional labor. I knew his type. 6 months into working together, he asked if I wanted to get coffee. Said he really enjoyed our conversations, thought we had a connection. Said he'd love to take me to this bookstore cafe I'd mentioned liking. His hands were shaking slightly. Eyes genuine, vulnerable. Disgusting. This was it. The moment they always showed their true colors. I'd been waiting for it. Made sure we were in the break room, 4 other people present. Looked at him with complete disdain. Let me be very clear, Nathan. I would never date you. The fact that you've been nice to me for months, pretending to care about what I say, just to manipulate me into going out with you, is exactly what's wrong with men. His face went white. No, I genuinely like talking to you. I wasn't. This is textbook nice guy syndrome. You think being decent earns you access to women's bodies. It doesn't. Your kindness is transactional and predatory. Everyone was staring. Sarah, from legal, looked uncomfortable. Marcus 2.0, we'd hired a replacement, was smirking. Nathan's voice was quiet. I'm sorry you feel that way. I really did want to get to know you better, but I understand. I'll leave you alone. He walked out. I should have left it there, but I didn't. Posted about it that night in our group chat. Another nice guy showed his true colors today. 6 months of friendship fraud just to try to get in my pants. When will they learn that we see through their manipulation tactics? Added, he actually looked hurt when I called him out publicly. The audacity of male entitlement never ceases to amaze me. Someone responded, they're all the same. Niceness is just covert contract making. Another, he probably thinks he's owed something for basic human decency. I felt validated, righteous, sent screenshots to other group chats. Nathan became a teaching moment. Saw him the next Monday. He nodded politely, kept walking. Every time we crossed paths after that, he was professionally cordial. Never mentioned it, never brought personal topics up again. Exactly what I wanted, except I noticed he stopped bringing in Friday donuts. Stopped the cheerful good mornings to the office. Still did his work brilliantly, but something had dimmed. Good, I thought. He was learning that performance of goodness wouldn't get him what he wanted. Over the next few months, I noticed other things. Heard him talking to Marcus 2.0 about his mom being sick. How he was her primary caretaker, drove her to chemo every Wednesday. How his dad had died when he was young, he was all she had. Obviously trying to gain sympathy. Saw him staying late multiple times, making up the hours he missed for those Wednesday appointments. While the rest of us left at 5, he'd be there until 8 or 9. Probably trying to prove something. Heard through the grapevine he'd been passed over for a leadership training program. They'd selected 3 women instead through a new equity initiative I'd helped implement. One of the women selected had half his experience. She mentioned feeling awkward about it. Nathan's actually really talented, seems unfair. I explained to her about correcting historical imbalances. About how men had been chosen over qualified women for decades. About how his feelings didn't matter compared to systemic change. She seemed uncertain but accepted it. Nathan never complained. Just congratulated the selectees and kept working. His performance reviews were always excellent. He'd started some initiative that saved the company like $200,000 a year. Mentored new employees without being asked. But I made sure to note in official feedback that he struggled with interpersonal boundaries and lacked awareness of workplace dynamics. Vague enough to stick, specific enough to hurt. Saw the confusion in his face when he read the 360-degree reviews. Delicious. Around month 10 of working there, the company did a volunteer day. We partnered with this organization that helped at-risk teenage boys. Nathan apparently had been volunteering there for 3 years. One of the kids, maybe 16, came up to him crying. His mom's boyfriend had beaten him up, kicked him out. Nathan spent 2 hours on the phone finding the kid emergency housing. Gave him money from his own wallet for food. Promised to check on him the next day. I watched this manipulation theater with disgust. Performing rescue fantasies to feed his hero complex. Using vulnerable children to make himself look good. Mentioned it at our next meeting. Saw the most insidious type of patriarchal performance today. Man using disadvantaged boys to create savior narrative. These kids need systemic help, not male role models, reinforcing toxic masculinity. Someone asked what he'd actually done. I explained the situation. Couple people looked skeptical. So he helped a kid in crisis. He performed help in a way that centered himself and reinforced masculine protector dynamics. The conversation moved on, but I felt less validated than usual. Year 2 at the company, Nathan got a new manager. Woman named Patricia, around 50, no-nonsense type. I tried to warn her about Nathan's nice guy tendencies. She listened politely, then said, "He's the best employee I've ever supervised. Shows up, does excellent work, helps others succeed, never complains. I should have 10 of him." She clearly didn't get it. Probably internalized misogyny. Nathan got promoted that year despite my feedback. His team loved working for him. He apparently had this policy where parents could flex their hours for childcare, where he'd cover for people having mental health crisis days, where he'd mentor anyone who asked, regardless of their background. Obviously, cultivating loyalty through permissive leadership. I tried to get on his team when a position opened. Thought I could document his failings from the inside. He rejected my application. Selected someone else with less experience. Finally, proof of his bias. Filed a complaint with Human Resources. During the investigation, he provided documentation that I'd been spreading rumors about him, that I'd made multiple false statements in official reviews, that other employees had complained about my treatment of male colleagues. The complaint was dismissed. I was told to maintain professional boundaries. Humiliating. Started pushing harder in my activism. We organized protests outside men's rights meetings. I'd photograph the attendees, post their faces online with their employers tagged. These men hate women enough to attend misogynist rallies. Their companies should know. Got 2 guys fired that way. One of them had been there because he'd lost custody of his kids and was desperate for support. Found out later he'd attempted suicide. Didn't die, unfortunately just hospitalized. Tried not to think about that. He was probably manipulative anyway. That's why he lost custody, obviously. Courts protect children, they'd never be biased. My brother's situation was different, or whatever. I didn't want to think about it. The protests, the complaints, the constant vigilance. It was exhausting but necessary. Sometimes late at night I'd feel this emptiness. Filled it with online arguments, with planning sessions, with righteous anger. Dated occasionally. Women mostly. Some men who proclaimed themselves allies. The allies were the worst. So desperate to prove they were one of the good ones. I'd test them, push them, see how long until they revealed their true nature. Usually about 6 weeks before they'd get frustrated with something. Want me to acknowledge their effort, or compromise on something, or stop criticizing some aspect of their maleness. That's when I'd know I was right about them. There were no good ones. Only ones who hadn't shown their colors yet. Nathan left the company after 3 years. Got recruited to some senior position at a competitor. Big salary increase, apparently. Going away party was weirdly emotional. People actually cried. He gave this speech about how much the team meant to him. How working with such brilliant, dedicated people had made him better at his job and as a person. How he'd miss everyone. Thanked his manager, Patricia. Thanked his team members individually. Mentioned specific things about how each person had contributed. Never once mentioned me, though. We'd worked together 3 years. I literally didn't exist in his narrative. Felt a weird twist in my stomach. Wasn't upset, obviously. Just noticed the exclusion. He'd thanked the janitor, literally thanked Jorge for keeping our space clean and always having a kind word. But not me. Whatever, I didn't want his fake appreciation anyway. Years 26 to 29 blurred together. More activism, more complaints, more men held accountable. Got another guy fired for sexual harassment. He'd asked a coworker about her weekend 3 times in a month. Clear pattern of boundary violation. She'd said it didn't bother her. She thought he was just being friendly. I explained to her about normalized harassment, about how she'd been conditioned to accept male intrusion. Helped her file the complaint for her own good. He was gone within a week. Had worked there 9 years, had 3 kids, saw his wife posting on social media about unexpected financial hardship, about her husband's mental health declining, about medical bills and job searching. Scrolled past. Collateral damage in a necessary war. My dating life was non-existent by 28. The emptiness was growing. Filled my apartment with plants, got a cat, spent evenings online, fighting, arguing, educating. My friends from the organizing group were my only real social circle. We'd get together and share war stories. But even those gatherings started feeling hollow. We'd repeat the same talking points, the same anger, the same certainty. Began to notice we were all single, all isolated from family, all defined entirely by opposition. Pushed the thoughts away. We were warriors. Loneliness was the price of fighting. Men had their male loneliness epidemic because they were refusing to do the emotional work. Our loneliness was different. Principled, chosen, meaningful. Definitely different. 29 was a hard year. My mom died. We hadn't been close. She'd left when I was young. But my brother planned the funeral. The brother who wouldn't speak to me. I showed up anyway. He was there with his daughter. He'd won partial custody somehow. She was maybe 8, beautiful, had his eyes. She looked at me curiously. Are you my aunt? My brother stepped between us. This is your aunt technically, sweetie, but we don't really know her. That hurt more than expected. After the service, my dad came up to me. He'd aged so much. Looked tired in a way that went bone deep. Your mother asked about you before she died. Wanted to reach out, but didn't know if you'd want to hear from her. She left us, I said. She was sick, depressed. It was the 1990s. She didn't get the help she needed. She always regretted it. She made a choice. So did you, he said quietly. You chose to cut out your brother when he needed family. Chose to see him as an enemy instead of someone in pain. Your mom did something similar, let her pain make her run from people who loved her. Watching you, it's like seeing her all over again. Walked away before he could say more. Didn't need his false equivalence. Didn't need his guilt trip. I was nothing like her. I hadn't abandoned anyone. They'd abandoned me by refusing to see the truth about systemic oppression. Totally different. Spent the next few months in a fog. Work, activism, sleep, repeat. The cat was good company. Didn't judge, didn't argue, didn't disappoint. My apartment was clean, organized, full of books and plants. Everything in its place. Everything controlled. Everything empty. 30th birthday came on a Thursday. No party, didn't want one. The organizing group sent a card. Dad sent nothing. Brother sent nothing. Had a session with my therapist that week. I'd been seeing her on and off for years. She was okay. Didn't fully get intersectional analysis, but tried. Mentioned feeling disconnected lately. Do you have close relationships in your life? She asked. I have my community, my activist network. I mean intimate relationships, people who know you beyond your politics, who you're vulnerable with. Thought about it. Came up empty. My politics are who I am. Anyone who knows my values knows me. What about joy? What brings you joy? Another long pause. Justice brings me joy, holding people accountable. What about simple joy? Music, food, laughter with friends, the feeling of sun on your face? Felt tears. Pushed them back. I don't have time for simple anything. There's too much work to do. She looked sad. What if the work is making you sick? What if the fight has become your whole identity, and without it, you don't know who you are? Anger flared, familiar and comfortable. You don't understand. The fight is necessary. Someone has to. I'm not questioning the necessity of justice. I'm questioning whether the way you're pursuing it is destroying you. Didn't go back to her after that. Clearly she'd bought into liberal incrementalism. Probably believed in reconciliation and healing and other useless concepts. Systems didn't change through healing. They changed through force. That Saturday was cold. Needed coffee. My machine had broken. Walked to the place 2 blocks over. Busy weekend morning crowd. Got in line, scrolling my phone. Saw a post in one of my groups about a protest next week. Planning to disrupt some father's rights rally. Started mentally drafting my response. Then I heard the laugh. Looked up. Nathan. Sitting at a table by the window. Didn't recognize him at first because he looked so different. Not physically, though he'd grown a short beard and looked healthy. It was the energy. He was radiating this contentment, this ease. Laughing at something. Turned to see who he was with. A woman. Around our age, maybe a bit younger. Asian features, warm smile, wearing a cozy sweater. She was looking at him like he'd hung the moon. Not in a desperate way, in a genuine way. Like she couldn't believe her luck. He was looking at her the same way. Their hands were intertwined on the table. Casual, comfortable, natural. She said something and he threw his head back laughing. Real laughter, the kind from your belly. The kind I hadn't heard from him in the 3 years we'd worked together. The kind I'd never heard from anyone directed at me. She kissed his cheek, completely unself-conscious. He turned and caught her lips. Gentle, sweet, full of affection. I couldn't look away. She pulled back and started telling some story, using her free hand to gesture animatedly. He was completely absorbed, nodding, interjected something. She laughed and swatted his arm playfully. Their body language was so easy. No performance, no strategy, no games. Just two people who genuinely enjoyed each other. Noticed a small box on the table between them. Real estate documents. They were buying a place together. She picked up one of the papers, pointing to something. He leaned over to look, his hand moving to rest on her back. Unconscious touch, protective but not possessive. She leaned into him slightly while they read. Puzzle pieces fitting. They looked up at each other at the same time. Said something simultaneously. Both cracked up. That kind of laughter that comes from intimacy. From knowing someone so well you share thoughts. The barista called my name. I'd forgotten I'd ordered. Grabbed my coffee with shaking hands. Nathan glanced toward the counter. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. There was no recognition. Or maybe there was recognition without interest. Like seeing a stranger whose face is vaguely familiar. His attention returned to her immediately. She was the center of his universe. I literally didn't register. 5 years ago, I'd publicly humiliated him. Made him a cautionary tale in my circles. Documented his failings and undermined his career. And he didn't even remember me enough to react. I'd been so important in my own narrative. The woman who rejected the nice guy, who held firm, who didn't fall for the manipulation. I was nothing to him. Less than nothing. An irrelevant blip from a past he'd moved beyond. Found myself walking outside, standing on the sidewalk. Could still see them through the window. She was showing him something on her phone. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. She melted into him with complete trust. Watched them for probably 10 minutes. Creepy. I knew it was creepy. Couldn't stop. They got up to leave eventually. He helped her with her coat. She wrapped a scarf around his neck, fussing with it. He caught her hands, held them, said something that made her eyes soft. They walked out together. Passed within 3 feet of me. Heard fragments of their conversation. Your mom doing with the new treatment? She's responding well, thank God. Means a lot that you visit her with me. Of course she's going to be my family too. His mom. The one with cancer he'd cared for alone years ago. This woman was visiting her with him. Supporting him through it. They disappeared around the corner. Stood there in the cold. Coffee going lukewarm in my hands. My phone buzzed. Notification from the organizing group. Someone posted, men are celebrating declining marriage rates because they hate commitment. Actually, they're just revealing how much they hate women. Thread of responses agreeing. Talking about male loneliness as deserved. About how men were getting exactly what they'd earned. I'd written posts like that 100 times. Celebrated men's suffering as cosmic justice. Another notification. My brother posted a photo. His daughter at a soccer game. He was coaching her team, apparently. Comments full of other parents praising him. Best coach ever. So patient with the kids. My daughter has learned so much. Hadn't spoken to him in 5 years. Because he'd asked me to see him as a person instead of an oppressor. Because he'd been suffering and I'd told him he deserved it. Opened my texts. Last message from my dad was 2 years ago. I love you and I miss you. The door is always open. I'd never responded. Because acknowledging his love would mean acknowledging I might be wrong. That maybe individual men could be good despite systemic patriarchy. That maybe I'd weaponize theory to avoid intimacy. Scrolled back further. Found the group chat where I'd mocked Nathan. Reread what I'd written 5 years ago. Another nice guy showed his true colors today. 6 months of friendship fraud just to try to get in my pants. Looked at the screenshots I'd shared. My friends calling him manipulative, predatory, entitled. Me soaking up their validation. Building my identity on his humiliation. He'd been genuinely kind. Brought me tea when I had a headache. Asked about my weekends because he cared. Was vulnerable enough to risk rejection. And I destroyed him for it. Not privately, publicly. Not kindly, cruelly. Turned it into a performance of my own righteousness. And he'd absorbed it. Said nothing, did nothing, just dimmed. Kept showing up, kept doing good work, kept helping others. Took care of his dying mother alone. Dealt with professional setbacks I'd caused. Faced my undermining and manipulation. And he'd stayed kind. Left the company with grace. Built a successful life. Found someone who appreciated what I'd scorned. The woman he was with. She looked at him like he was precious. Touched him with tenderness. Supported him through his mother's illness. Was building a life with him. buying a home together, probably planning a future. Marriage, maybe kids, definitely partnership. Everything I'd rejected wasn't just Nathan. It was the possibility of connection, the vulnerability of being known, the risk of loving someone who might hurt you. I'd chosen safety through hatred, chosen certainty through ideology, chosen righteousness through cruelty. And what did I have? A cat, a clean apartment, a job where people were professionally afraid of me, an activist community built on shared anger. No family, no intimacy, no joy, no Nathan. The thought surprised me, not that I wanted him specifically, but that I'd rejected what he represented. Someone who'd seen me and wanted to know me more. Someone willing to be vulnerable. Someone genuinely kind in a world that punished kindness. I'd convinced myself his kindness was manipulation, that nice men were performing to get sex, that vulnerability was a trap. But watching him with her, seeing his gentleness, his care, his obvious devotion, that wasn't performance. That was character. 5 years ago, I could have said yes to coffee, could have had a conversation. Worst case, it wouldn't work out and we'd go our separate ways. Best case, I'd be the one sitting in that cafe, laughing at shared jokes, buying a home with someone who loved me, meeting his mother, being there during chemo, being loved with that kind of tenderness. Instead, I'd humiliated him, made him an example, taught him that vulnerability would be punished. And he'd learned to keep his kindness away from me, learned I was unsafe, learned to find someone else, someone better, the woman in the warm sweater who touched him like he mattered, who probably told him he was good when the world said he should be harder, who probably appreciated his emotional openness instead of calling it weakness, who probably loved him for exactly who he was. I'd thrown that away. No, worse. I'd scorned it, mocked it, turned it into content for my political narrative, used his humanity as a prop in my ideology. My phone buzzed again. The group chat planning the protest against fathers' rights. These men just want to escape child support, they're deadbeats hiding behind victimhood. Thought about my brother, fighting for years just to see his daughter, going broke on legal fees, sleeping on a friend's couch at one point, and now coaching her soccer team, showing up, being present, loving her. Was he a deadbeat hiding behind victimhood? Thought about the man I'd helped get fired, the one who'd asked a coworker about her weekend. 3 kids at home, wife posting about financial hardship and his declining mental health. Was he a predator who deserved to lose everything? Thought about the men at the rally I'd photographed, the one who'd attempted suicide after losing custody. Was his pain less real than mine? Did his suffering matter less because of his gender? Started scrolling back through years of posts. My posts, thousands of them, celebrating male failure, mocking male vulnerability, dismissing male pain, calling for more punishment, more accountability, more consequences. Had I made anything better? Had I reduced anyone's suffering? Or had I just created more pain and called it justice? The feminist theory I could recite perfectly. The arguments I'd won. The men I'd held accountable. What had it built? A movement, a community, or just a fortress of isolation? Remembered my therapist's question. What brings you joy? Couldn't answer it then. Couldn't answer it now. When had I last laughed like Nathan was laughing? When had I last touched someone with tenderness? When had I last been vulnerable? When had I last been soft? Couldn't remember. Softness was weakness. Vulnerability was dangerous. Joy was frivolous. Only the fight mattered. And the fight had consumed everything. Consumed my family. Consumed my capacity for connection. Consumed 5 years while Nathan built a life. Consumed my 20s while he found love. Walked home slowly. Apartment felt different. Still clean, still organized. Now obviously empty. The cat greeted me. Only living thing that wanted me home. Sat on my couch. Looked at my bookshelves. Every book about oppression, resistance, revolution. Not a single novel. Not a single thing read just for pleasure. Looked at my walls. Protest posters, political art. Nothing beautiful just for beauty's sake. Looked at my phone. Contacts full of people I'd never actually been vulnerable with. People who knew my opinions but not my fears. People I strategized with but never cried with. People bound by shared enemy, not shared love. This was what I'd chosen. This was what I'd built instead of coffee with Nathan. He'd offered me something 5 years ago. Not just a date, but a door. A possibility of being known. Of being seen as something other than my politics. Of being loved as a person, not a comrade. And I'd slammed it shut. Worse, I'd punished him for offering. Made an example of him. Taught him that I was exactly as hateful as I'd seemed. He'd learned the lesson. Took his kindness elsewhere. Found someone worthy of it. Someone who hadn't spent years marinating in contempt. Someone who could receive love without suspicion. Someone who could give it back. Opened my laptop. Found the old posts about him. Read through the comments. All my friends agreeing he was terrible. All of us so certain. So righteous. So completely wrong. He wasn't a nice guy performing goodness. He was a good person being authentic. And I'd mistaken authenticity for manipulation. Because I couldn't imagine someone being kind without ulterior motive. Because I'd been taught all men were performing. Because I'd chosen to believe the worst. It was easier that way. Believing the worst meant never risking hurt. Meant never having to be vulnerable. Meant never having to question my worldview. Meant never having to grow. And I hadn't grown. In 5 years I'd become more entrenched. More bitter. More alone. While Nathan had grown into someone confident. Someone happy. Someone loved. The math was simple and devastating. 5 years ago, 2 people, both single, one offering connection. Today, one person radiantly happy, one person completely alone. The difference wasn't luck. It was choice. He chose to stay open after I hurt him. Chose to keep being kind after I called it manipulation. Chose to believe in love after I'd modeled contempt. I chose safety and hatred. Chose certainty and ideology. Chose isolation over risk. And we'd each gotten exactly what we chose. Thought about messaging him. Saying what? Sorry? Congratulations? I was wrong? It was 5 years too late. I was a stranger he'd forgotten. Or worse, a memory of cruelty he'd moved past. Nothing I could say would matter. He had everything he needed. Everything I'd thrown away. Sat there as the afternoon faded. Cat curled in my lap. Apartment getting dark. Didn't turn on the lights. Just sat with it. The weight of 5 years. The cost of certainty. The price of righteousness. Somewhere across the city, Nathan was probably home. With the woman in the warm sweater. Making dinner together. Talking about their day. Planning their future in their new home. Being happy. Being loved. Being everything I'd convinced myself didn't exist. And I was here. Alone in the dark. With my theories and my anger and my empty apartment. With my burned bridges and my blocked family and my shallow community. With nothing but the fight. And the terrible, crushing realization that I'd fought the wrong battle. Destroyed the wrong enemy. Won the wrong victory. And lost everything that mattered. 30 years old. Standing at the window now. City lights coming on. Somewhere out there people were loving each other. Risking hurt for connection. Choosing vulnerability over safety. Building lives instead of walls. And I was here. Finally understanding what I'd done. Finally seeing what I'd become. Finally knowing what I'd lost. Too late. Years too late. A lifetime too late. Nathan was gone. My brother was gone. My father was gone. My 20s were gone. And all I had left was the certainty I'd chosen over love. The righteousness I'd chosen over family. The ideology I'd chosen over humanity. It had cost me everything. And it was my fault. All of it. Completely. Devastatingly my fault. No one to blame but myself. No one to hate but the person I'd become. The cat shifted in my lap. Outside, life continued. Inside, I sat with what I'd done. With who I'd become. With what I'd lost. And the knowledge that I deserved exactly this. This emptiness. This isolation. This regret. Because I'd earned it. One cruel choice at a time.